Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and this is the second video in my Essentials of Negotiation series. This video we're going to talk about some terms and some strategies and some tactics of distributive bargaining. And so I'm going to give you an overview and essentially talk about reasons for distributive bargaining. Distributive bargaining is basically a competition over who is going to get the most of a limited resource. There are three reasons for understanding distributive bargaining. The first one, some independent situations are distributive. Two, you should know how to counter distributive tactics. And three, every negotiation may require distributive skills during the claiming of value stage. Understanding these concepts will allow negotiators not comfortable with distributive bargaining to manage their situations proactively. So let's talk about the distributive bargaining situation. The term target point is a negotiator's optimal goal. It's where you want to get people at in the negotiation process. The resistance point is a negotiator's bottom line. This is where you won't go any lower. The asking price is the essential price set by the seller. The buyer may counter with what we call an initial offer. Both parties should set their starting point, target, and resistance points before negotiation. So this is done behind the scenes with the management team or the people who are going to be involved. These are kind of secret numbers that are out there so that the negotiation can go smoothly. You don't just go out and put out all your cards on the table in most bargaining situations. So starting points are the points where is the very open to the public point, and target points are always inferred, and resistance points, these are top secret. So the spread between the resistance point is the bargaining range, the settlement range or zone of potential agreement. When a buyer's resistance point is above the seller's, there's a positive bargaining range. When the seller's resistance point is above the buyer's, there is a negative bargaining range. Target points, resistance points, and initial offers all play important roles in distributive bargaining. Let's talk about the settlement point. The fundamental process of distributive bargaining is to reach a settlement within a positive bargaining range. The objective of both parties is to obtain as much of the bargaining range as possible. In other words, to reach an agreement as close to the other party's resistance point as possible. Both parties know they might have to settle for less than their target point, but hope the agreement will be better than their own resistance point, of course. For agreement to occur, both parties must believe that the settlement is the best that they can get within a positive bargaining range. So in the bargaining process, it's part of the deal is you have to kind of discover what the other party's resistance point is. And this information is the life force of the negotiation. The more you can learn about the other party's information, the more able you'll be able to strike a favorable settlement. At the same time, you don't want the other party to know your resistance point and some of your targets and information about a weak strategic position or an emotional vulnerability. Each side wants to obtain and conceal information, and communication can become complex, and you have to really listen to the coded languages that are involved. So it's a little bit like poker, chess, I guess. Influencing the other party's resistance point is what negotiators really have to learn how to do. It's central to planning the strategy and tactics and locating other parties' resistance point and the relationship of that resistance point to your own. The resistance point is established by the value the other attaches to a particular outcome, the costs the other attaches to delay or difficulty in a negotiation, and the cost others attach to having the negotiations aborted. When influencing the other's viewpoint, you must also deal with the other party's understanding of your value for a particular outcome, the costs you attach to delay or difficulty in negotiation, and your costs of having the negotiation aborted. So if you want to recognize the weakening of the other party's resistance point, there really are four major ways to weaken the other party's resistance point. So one is reduce the other party's estimate of your costs or delay or impasse. Increase the other party's estimate of their own cost of delay or impasse. Reduce the other party's perception of the value of the issue, or increase the other party's perception that you value an issue. So some tactical tasks. There are four important tactical tasks for a negotiator to consider in a distributed bargaining situation. So first, assess the other party's target, resistance point, and costs of terminating the negotiations. Second, manage the other party's impression of your target, resistance point, and cost of terminating negotiations. Or three, modify the other party's perception of their own target, resistance point, and cost of terminating negotiations. Or finally, four, manipulating the actual costs of delaying or terminating negotiations. Assessing the other party's target, resistance point, and costs of terminating negotiations. The purpose really is to identify what the other party really wants to achieve, as well as how much they are willing to pay. You can do an indirect or a direct assessment. An indirect assessment, you're obtaining information indirectly about the background factors behind an issue. You have to determine what information a negotiator used to set the target and resistance points, and then study how they may have interpreted the information. A direct assessment, you obtain information directly from the other party about their target and resistance points. When at the limit, the other party may reveal information, and most of the time the other party is not forthcoming, and methods of obtaining information are complex. So let's talk about managing the other party's impression of your target, resistance point, and cost of terminating negotiations. Negotiators need to screen information about their own positions and represent them as they would like the others to believe. So it's a little bit of acting that takes place. Screening activities are more important at the beginning of negotiation, and direct action is more useful later on. So screening activities include concealing, which is generally done. Calculated incompetence may be a useful approach. Channel communication through a team spokesperson, and present many items, only a few that are important to you. So direct action, you have a selective presentation. You're revealing only the necessary facts. You're explaining or interpreting known facts to present a logical argument. You delay an emotional reaction. You need to raise an ethical concern, or things may backfire. When modifying the other party's perception of his or her target, resistance point, or cost terminating negotiations, a negotiator can alter the other party's impression of their own objectives by making outcomes appear less attractive, or by making the cost of obtaining them appear higher. The negotiator may also try to make demands and positions appear more attractive or less unattractive to the other party, And there are several approaches to modifying the other party's perceptions. One approach is to interpret for the other party what the outcomes of their proposal really will be. You can manipulate the actual costs of delaying or terminating negotiations. Extending negotiations beyond a deadline really can be costly, and the ultimate weapon in a negotiation is to threaten to terminate the negotiations, denying both parties the possibility of a settlement. Most of the time people want to stay in the conversation longer, but when one person makes a threat, the other one has to really start listening. There are 3 ways to manipulate the costs of delaying in a negotiation. One is distributive action. So it's a public picketing, boycotting a product of a company, and locking negotiators in a room until an agreement is met. Maybe you've seen this happen before. You work for an organization where this has happened. Alliance with outsiders is another way, and that involves other parties who can influence the outcome of a process. Sometimes when, let's take a union strike for instance, sometimes when you are let's use a grocery worker in a union bargaining situation, maybe the truck drivers who belong to another organizations that deliver the products, maybe they could get involved in saying, well, we're not going to cross a picket line, and so that puts more pressure on the company to stay in the bargaining. Or schedule manipulation, and then negotiation schedules can be used to increase the pressure of time. So positions taken during negotiations with opening offers. Making the first offer is advantageous as it can anchor a negotiation. Higher initial offers have a strong effect on negotiating outcomes. Exaggerating an opening offer is advantageous. It gives the negotiator room for movement. It may create an impression in the other party's mind of a long way to a settlement. It will also suggest there will be many concessions to make. It may make the other party reconsider their own resistance point too. So there are some 2 main disadvantages to exaggerating an opening offer, and those are: 1, potential rejection by the other party, halting negotiations prematurely, or 2, the perception of a tough attitude can harm a long-term relationship. So remember, relationships are fragile, and these kinds of negotiations may take place on a regular basis. Ultimately, you want to maintain a long-term relationship. Positions taken during negotiations, you have to have an opening stance. A second decision negotiators should make concerns the stance or the attitude to adopt during the negotiation. How are you acting within the negotiations? Are you competitive? Are you moderate? Negotiators tend to match distributive tactics from the other party with their own distributive tactics. To communicate effectively, a negotiator should try to send a consistent message through both the opening offer and opening stance. When the messages are in conflict, the other party will find them confusing to interpret and answer. So timing really plays a big part in how things are said. So how you say things really makes a difference. Positions taken during a negotiation and involves initially making some concessions. An opening offer is usually met with a counteroffer, and these 2 offers define the initial bargaining range. The first concession conveys a message, frequently a symbolic one, to the other party about how you'll proceed. Negotiators who take a hard line achieve better economic outcomes, but at a cost of being perceived negatively by the other party. There are good reasons for adopting a flexible position. So 1, when taking different stances through the negotiation, you can learn about the other party's targets and perceived possibilities by observing how they respond to different proposals. Flexibility keeps the negotiations proceeding. The more flexible you seem, the more the other party will believe a settlement is possible. So there are some positions that you can take during negotiation in the role of concessions. So concessions are central. Without them, negotiations don't exist. Immediate concessions are perceived less valuable than gradual, delayed concessions. Negotiators generally resent a take it or leave it approach. Parties feel better about a settlement when the negotiation involves a progression of concessions. Concessions imply recognition of the other's position and its legitimacy, and a reciprocal concession cannot be haphazard. So negotiators may not accept inadequate reciprocal concessions. Packaging concessions can lead to better outcomes than making concessions singly on individual issues. So the pattern of concessions contains information, but it may be difficult to interpret. So you might, in the negotiation process, write things down. 1. Successive concessions get smaller, the concession maker's position is getting firmer, and the resistance point is being approached. And it's important to understand that a concession late in negotiations may also indicate that there is little more room left to move, so you have to kind of feel that out. Positions taken during negotiation, final offers. Eventually, a negotiator wants to convey the message that there is no further room for movement. A simple absence of further concessions conveys that message, but the other party may feel the pattern of concessions being violated. One way to accomplish this is to make the last concession more substantial, large enough to be dramatic, yet not so large that it creates suspicion that the negotiator has been holding back. A concession may also be personalized to the other party, signaling that this is the last concession the negotiator will make. I went to my boss and I got this special deal just for you. You've probably seen that happen at the car dealerships too, right? Positions taken during negotiation and the closing deal. You can provide alternatives by providing 2 or 3 alternative packages for the other party that are roughly equal in value. You can assume a close after the discussion about the buyer needs and position, act as if the decision to purchase has already been made. Split the difference. The negotiator summarizes the negotiation and suggests, why don't we just split the difference? Exploding offers contains an extremely tight deadline in order to pressure the other party to agree, and the purpose is to convince the other party to accept the settlement and to stop considering outcomes. You can add sweeteners to save a special concession for the close. I'll give you X if you agree to the deal. Some hardball tactics. Now let's look at hardball tactics with an open mind. Hardball tactics work best against poorly prepared negotiators. They also can backfire, so you have to be really careful in pulling out the hardball. Yet many find that tactics are offensive and they're out of bounds. And the deal is you need to be building a trusting relationship with the person that you're negotiating with. So how you treat them will affect the way that the negotiations go. They're often very difficult to act, and each involves risk for the person that's using it. So it's important to understand that hardball tactics and how they work, that they can be used against you. So what if you have hardball tactics from the other party? There really are 4 main options for responding to hardball tactics. 1, you can discuss them, label it. Hey, this looks like a hardball tactic. I would love to be able to negotiate this without you playing these games with me. Or you can ignore them. That's That's option number 2. Ignoring a hardball tactic. This can be a really good option, and the tactic really takes a lot of energy to enact properly. It's got to be a mental mindset. You can respond in kind. You can come back with a hard ball tactic, and this may be useful when dealing with another party who is testing your resolve as a response to exaggerated positions. Or you can co-opt the other party, and it's more difficult to attack a friend than an enemy, right? So hardball tactics, good cop, bad cop. So it often leads to concessions and negotiated agreements, but the tactic really has many weaknesses. They're relatively transparent, especially with repeated use. Easily countered by the other party, who may call out that tactic. Difficult to enact. It requires a lot of energy in making the tactic work. It may alienate the other party, and negotiators may get involved in the game and fail to concentrate on their goals. So it just feels like a game, right? Some typical hardball tactics and low ball and high ball. So negotiators start with a ridiculously low or high opening offer they know that they'll never achieve. The theory is that an extreme offer will cause the other party to reevaluate their opening offer and move closer to or beyond their risk resistance point. There is risk in using this tactic. The other party may think that it's a waste of time to negotiate and then just stop the process. The best way to deal with a low ball or a high ball tactic is not to make a counter offer. So insist the other party start with a reasonable opening offer and refuse to negotiate further until they do. Show the other party that you won't be tricked and threaten to leave the negotiation, or respond with an extreme counter offer, right? So there's something, another hardball tactic called the bogey. And negotiators use this tactic to pretend that an issue is of little or no importance to them when it really is quite important to them. Later, this issue can be traded for major concessions on issues that are actually important to them. They are most effective when a negotiator identifies an issue that is quite important to the other side but of little value to themselves. And this tactic is fundamentally deceptive and can be difficult to enact. Although difficult to defend against, being well prepared for the negotiation will help make you less susceptible to it. If the other party takes a position opposite of your expectations, suspect a bogey tactic and ask probing questions. Be cautious about sudden reversals in positions, especially late in the negotiation. Again, question the other party very carefully. So another typical hardball tactic is called the nibble. Negotiators use the nibble tactic for a proportionally smaller concession on an item that hasn't been discussed previously in order to close the deal. And there are some weaknesses, of course, in using the nibble, as well as some strengths. Some of the weaknesses are that many feel that the party is using the nibble not to bargain in good faith, and then the party being nibbled will not feel good about the process. So you can combat the nibble tactic by responding with each nibble with the question, what else do you want? Or, and then you can have your own nibbles prepared for an exchange too. So you have to think about what those look like in advance, right? What could your nibbles be? There's a tactic, hardball tactic called chicken. And combining a large bluff with a threatening action to force the other parties to chicken out and give them what they want. So it's kind of a tactic of weakness, and it turns the negotiation into a serious game in which one or both parties find it difficult to distinguish reality from a postured negotiation position. it really is difficult to defend against. You have to prepare and understand the situation and be able to identify where reality ends and the chicken tactic begins. Most of us don't read minds, so you gotta have to use your gut to see if the chicken tactic is being used. Another hardball tactic, very common, is intimidation, and that's an attempt to force the other party to agree by means of an emotional ploy, usually anger or fear. You have to do this or we're out of here. You know, usually when people get emotional, it causes people to react in a certain way. So intimidation may increase an appearance of legitimacy. The greater the appearance of legitimacy, less likely the other party will be to question the process. Guilt is also used to intimidate people. This places the other party on the defense. Dealing with intimidation tactics, you can't allow yourself to feel threatened. Discuss the negotiation process with them. Ignore the party's attempts to intimidate you and use a team to negotiate. Usually when you have other people with you, you feel a little bit stronger. It also puts some accountability on you to do the right thing. So really keeping your cool when you notice someone is trying to intimidate you. You know, we get to choose how we feel about things, so sometimes you have to take a step back and just take the higher road, right? So related to that is aggressive behavior. Some people are better using aggressive behavior to get their own ways than other ways, but that's a tactic that is often used in negotiation. You know, people are being relentless, and they're just pushing for further concessions. You know, they're asking for the best offer early in negotiations, and they're asking the other party to explain and justify their proposals. An excellent response is to halt the negotiations in order to discuss the negotiation process itself. You know, having a team to counter aggressive tactics can really be really helpful, and good preparation makes responding easier as negotiators can highlight the merits to both parties reaching an agreement. The last hardball tactic that I want to talk about is called the snow job, S-N-O-W. Negotiators are overwhelmed. They overwhelm the other party with so much information that they have trouble determining important facts from distractions. Another example is to use of highly technical language to hide a simple answer to a question asked by a non-expert. The snow job can backfire as it interferes with the ability of negotiators to concentrate on what is important in order to reach agreements. Now, negotiators can use the following ideas to counter these snow job tactics. One is ask questions until you receive an answer that you understand, which is, I think, always a good idea to ask questions along the way. It gets people to explain their point of view, and it's kind of expected in negotiations is to ask questions. If the matter is highly technical, suggest that technical experts get together to discuss the issues. And then listen to the other party and identify consistent and inconsistent information. Bottom line is a strong preparation in defending against a snow job is going to help you be able to get into a situation where you actually can make an agreement. So I've given you a lot of terms here about strategies and tactics of distributed bargaining. This is the second video in my series. I hope that you found some value. You might go back and listen to it again, review some of the terms, and take notes, and stay tuned for the next video. I hope that you have a great day, because only you get to choose how you feel about it. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt.